Okay, this is gonna be a tomato seed saving video. I guess I'm gonna do this. Back up a little so you can see my face. So the first step is knowing when to harvest the tomatoes. You can see this is a whole row of Paul Robeson tomatoes, and it is far away from any other tomatoes. We usually do at least 50 feet on our heirloom tomatoes. These ones are a couple hundred feet from the nearest tomato, which is great. Just to prevent hybridization. And so knowing when to harvest for seed is really important. Luckily with tomatoes, you harvest about the same time when you would eat the fruit. And so with these ones, they naturally, part of what makes them Paul Robeson tomatoes is they have green shoulders. Usually we don't want green shoulders in a tomato when we harvest it. So I'm feeling it, it's squishy, it's deep red color on the bottom. You know, these ones are even further along. So these ones are redder. So I'm gonna take these ones. And we're gonna go through the row and take all of them. We're looking for that deep color. And then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so we've harvested all of the ripe Paul Robeson tomatoes. And now we're at the stage where we are going to go through and grade them and decide which ones are good for seed and which ones we will eat or compost. So this is another step of the selection process. We've already hypothetically gotten rid of any tomato plants that don't look well, whether it's disease or if they're off types. But luckily this whole row had great health and everything was looking like it should. And so now we're at another step where we can select. So basically all seed savers are plant breeders in that we're helping to select the next generation, what it looks like, how healthy it is, how it tastes. And so we're gonna look inside this bucket here. I'll put my mask on if you wanna come closer. And we're gonna decide which of these are gonna have children that make it to the future through seed keeping. So one thing I was taught by my mentor, William Moyes Weaver, is that double fruits, these that look like two lumps instead of one, had double flowers. So their flowers are much more open in structure and therefore more easy for bees to move pollen between them. It's a self-pollinated plant, but bees do move pollen occasionally, especially when the flowers are wide open like this. And so just as good measure, I always take out the double fruits, which happen to be the nicest ones, for eating. There's so much more to them. This had some cracking because of all the rain we got after a long time of no rain. That's not an issue, but it happens to be a double fruit. So we're gonna take it out. I am gonna take out this one that cracked and started rotting, because again, I think it might just be an issue of too much water all of a sudden, but then it started looking nasty, and I don't like to take seeds from fruits that are unappealing in any way, even if it's not a genetic issue, just for good measure. Let's see, what else? This is also a double fruit. It's unlikely we'll have crossing since, like I said, these plants are so far from any of our other tomatoes, hundreds of feet. But just for good measure, I'm taking out the few that are doubles from double flowers. And what we have left here are all these beautiful round, nicely ripened tomatoes. We could select against small fruits, but this isn't too bad. This is pretty small, maybe we'll eat that one. I'm definitely not a plant geneticist, so maybe there's some things I do that are not necessary, but I like to really select from just the nicest looking fruits, the ones that I want to see in generations to come on the future plants, so that our customers and also for ourselves, we're getting the best tomatoes possible. You never want to save seeds. The impulse a lot of people have is to save seeds from the ones you don't want to eat, but that's counterintuitive because you want to save seeds from the ones you want to eat for years to come. So you're selecting for the future health of the plant and future productivity. And that's another reason why we especially select seeds from our earliest tomatoes. With something like tomatoes where people always want them earlier, fruiting earlier, then you select from your earliest ripening fruits. That way you're selecting for earliness. Another reason is tomatoes get a lot of diseases later in the season. And so if you're selecting from your plants before they get something like a late blight, then you're gonna have better production, you're gonna have selection for early ripening, and and less of a chance of passing disease from seed to seed. So at this point, I'm going to cut these all in half at the equator. I cut them at the equator because that exposes all of the seed cavities. We're going to squeeze them into this bucket. I always check to make sure there's no seeds in the bucket from a previous tomato, so that you're not mixing up varieties. And then you just squeeze them. Maybe you can look from above. I'm squeezing them so that their seeds and pulp come out. And then we're gonna cook these up and eat them as sauce, or eat them fresh, so you don't have too much waste there. Okay, so this is a whole different tomato. I wanted to just talk about 3 other things. One is, look how those seeds fell on the table. One other thing I learned from William Moyes Weaver is when a seed falls on the table or the floor, it is a goner. Because we don't know, even though we've thoroughly cleaned this table after the Paul Robeson, we want to be extra careful not to mix tomato seed varieties. So I'm not going to take seeds that drop from the fruits. I'm going to let them go back to the earth, which is nice for them. And then another thing is, look at the different ways I cut them. San Marzano, which is this tomato, it's a nice southern Italian tomato for sauce, tricked me into cutting it lengthwise instead of at the equator like these ones. You see, at the equator you can see all the seeds, the seed cavities are open, and then these that are cut the other way, they're actually hard to get the seeds. The other thing is I cut the tops off so that I can make sauce much more easily with the remaining flesh of the tomatoes, and sauce tastes so much better when the seeds are out anyway, so it's kind of a perfect seed saving activity, is to first get the seeds and then make the sauce. Similar with all the peppers that we grow, we either freeze them or dehydrate them or cook with them right away after we take the seeds out. Okay, so I've squeezed all the good tomatoes, Paul Robesons. They're all in here with their pulp. We're going to ferment that pulp off of them for 3 days. And I'm adding a little bit of water. First of all, I'm spraying the seeds off the wall to get them in the mix. Adding just a little more water to prevent, why am I doing that? Really to prevent it from drying out. And, you know, in an ideal world, over the next few days, I'll stir this a couple times, though I really never do that. And it turns out great. And this will raise the germination rate because the unripe seeds will float, and it'll clear off all of that germination inhibiting gel around the seeds. Can do some disease control for the fermentation process, and it just makes them so much easier to clean. So I'll show you the other end of this after it ferments, and we'll put a little hat over this, a breathable hat, to keep these flies from laying eggs in there. Okay, so this is the quote-unquote hat, which is probably not the best word for it, but something that'll allow the ferment to breathe. We also ferment totally ripe cucumbers, the ones that are way past the point where you would eat them, bitter melons, and eggplants, and passion fruits. Anything else? Also cantaloupes. And I think that's it. So we treat them all the same way we treat tomatoes. I labeled it by placing this on top, which is the lazy way. I usually have something attached permanently so that I know for sure what type of tomato it is and what date we started it. So that now it's been 4 days. I usually try for 3 days. 3 to 5 is okay for fermenting. And you know, it's in this bucket where we tied it so that the flies couldn't get in, and also the mice. But flies are the worst because you will end up with little larvae like squirming around in your fermented seeds, and that's gross. Even though it doesn't ruin your batch, you just have to work around them, and they'll dry up in the drying process and then turn into dust, which is kind of gross to think about, but that's how you deal with that. I'm adding, with a little bit of force, an entire bucket worth of water. The force is to kind of mix up all the mat of mold and ferment and pulp on top, which helps to free up some of the seeds, the good seeds that might have gotten trapped in that mat of funk. So I'm definitely splashing myself with funky tomato water, and I'm gonna let it settle. One thing you could do is take a stick and stir it up a little more, but I kind of sprayed it pretty hard, so it should be pretty good. So I'm letting it settle. You can imagine all the seeds are like twirling around the whole thing, and now they're like settling down to the bottom. And I'm gonna pour off the top over here. This is what we call decanting. You see, here comes the gunk, the foam, the skin, and any kind of bad, quote-unquote bad seeds or unviable seeds. So I'll go as far as I feel comfortable that I'm not going to pour out seeds. You can see them hanging around in the back there. And then I'm going to do it all over again until all we have is clear water and good seeds. It might take, 2 or 3 or 4 tries until we get to that point. Again, we call this decanting. One of the best parts of cleaning tomato seeds this way is, it just does a really good job of cleaning them in a way you couldn't do without this fermentation process. Because that gel is around the seed, all that pulp, and this just separates it really well. I might be losing a few good seeds in there, but it's worth it for all the other benefits of fermenting. See, it's getting pretty clean. It's almost all clear water and good seeds. This process helps with some, if there's any disease organisms in there, this will help with fighting that off, though we only select from fruits and plants that are not diseased in appearance. Just in case, the fermentation process helps with that. Might lose some more good seeds here. So at some point you have to make a judgment call about when it's beneficial to keep decanting and when it's causing you to lose some good seeds. I think we'll call it quits now, because it's pretty much clear water and good seeds. Any of the other bits in there we'll pick out in the during or after the drying process. And now we're going to strain it. Get a little bit more. So when working with seeds, you want to make sure your strainer's smaller than the size of your seed. Obviously, I have poured seeds into things that they then fell through. You don't want that in this case when you're straining out the water. So I'm just knocking it, getting some of the water out. A lot of times I'll put this inside a paper towel and then squeeze. We don't have any paper towels at the farm right now, so I'm just going to squeeze the seed mass itself to get as much of the excess water out. And then we're going to just put it on this bag. And, spread them out so that they dry out quicker. And then super duper important is to label it again with the name of the variety and the date that you started drying, so that for us we dry for 2 weeks in a basement that has a dehumidifier and a fan going. If you don't have a dehumidifier or a basement, you could just try a fan. You don't want it to be in direct sun. I use a shopping bag because unlike paper towels, they don't stick when they dry. They just come off real easy. And I reuse the shopping bags over and over. So we may use the shopping bag, 10 times for different drying projects in the season. And we just make sure that there's no seeds stuck to it from the previous. And if there are, that it's the same variety, because you don't want to mix up 2 varieties of tomatoes, for example. There's no way to tell them apart by their seeds. And I'll put them, once they've dried for 2 weeks, in a well-labeled jar with the date, the name, where we grew it, Mill Hollow, our call number for it. But this is nice because the jars have a screw top, which keeps out critters from crawling in. Thank you so much for watching. Please check us out at trueloveseeds.com and at seedkeeping on Instagram. And let us know your tomato seed keeping tips. Good luck with all of your seed keeping, and thanks again.